Hello. So we are in the animation portion. I figured I'd make this real quick. There's probably not going to be a lot of videos after this because it's your own creative liberty. But I figured going over the fundamentals of animation for Maya would be good. So we're going to come up and drop a plane. This is going to be our ground. We're just doing a ball bounce. Let's go on over into the channel box editor because we're not going to be changing this. Go into your inputs and turn it down to 1 by 1. Press R to scale and scale it up so we can have our floor. You can move it above the plane if you want. And then go ahead and drop a sphere for our ball. Press spacebar to get into the side view. I'm just going to come over here and place this. Now, like I said, in class, what you could do, since we have the ball and we have our floor, if you're not very good yet at timing out your animations, you can go ahead and grab your phone and just take your finger and go on that line of action. And this way you don't have to count yet. I know a lot of people will get, as you're counting, you're going along with your line of motion. So you'll speed up in some portions or whatever. So this way, if we're looking at it, we can just do our motion that we want, and then we'll be able to look at our phone later, our camera, and the video that we took to see at what point does the ball hit this point, the lowest point, and what point does the ball hit the next peak. And then you're just able to go using your 24 frames per second down to that point. I'm just going to shorten my timeline. 50 for right now. Right. So, go ahead and film that, and then you can start the video back up. For more theoretical purposes, I'm going to go ahead and go through. I did not time mine out, so like I said, it's for theoretical purposes. But say when you were filming, so you're going to count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, It's 24 frames per second. So say that the ball hit this point at 1 second. Right? So we need to make sure that we keyframe this at the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and hit S to keyframe. And then you're going to notice down in your timeline that there's a red line. Now, it's very important to realize that, I'm just going to keep him right here for a second. It is the frame after the red line that you are keyframing. And if you ever mix it up, you can delete or copy and paste and move along your keyframes. Alright, so in my theoretical video that I took, I have determined that at 1 second, 24 frames per second, 1 second, the ball hits the floor. So I'm going to try to follow my line of action. Now, if yours is coming up a little bit more, if this is not the peak, then go ahead and do, you'd want to see wherever it peaks, but mine is just going to hit the floor, and I'm following its line of action. So I am going to grab the center just so I can move it diagonally and then wait until my ball is in the floor. We can go back and adjust this, no worry. But I'm going to hit S there. And then I'm going to come out to whatever my seconds was and go ahead and bring it up to that second peak. And do the same. Alright, floor there. So you should have something that's like this, right? and using our video we can get the timing a bit better. So now what we're going to come is we have a ball, but it's not squashing and stretching yet, right? So what we can do is come into the point where it hits the ground, because that's the easiest one to figure out what it's doing. Go ahead and squash it, and you may need to move it back into the ground or not. And I'm just going to hit S again. We don't need to delete that frame and re-hit it. So I'm going to go through and find these points and just squash them. This one I do need to move down. Right, and it should be every other one. Maybe it's not as severe at, oops, I forgot to hit S. Maybe it's not as severe at the smaller points. No, it's just rolling. So now we have this. Our ball is squashing. If you notice, so when we're keyframing, it's going to take that position from where you last keyframed it to the next big movement, right? So we can see that it's taking from frame 1 all the way from frame 24 to get to this position, and Maya's going to try and figure out which way that you want it to go. This is obviously not how we want it to go. So what I'm going to do is find where that's hitting, and I want to turn this so it's going directly up. I'm just going to point this and move this up. I'll go ahead and keyframe that. So now I have that line of action. And I'm going to do the same to the other side. Right? So now we have a point, and you should try to get it so that these edges are going towards the center, so you have that nice line of action. And you may need to go in and adjust some of these a bit more. So it's actually falling down with your line of action. Yeah, I don't want this squashed yet. Right. Cool. So go ahead and do that for each step in your ball, and go back through and find, maybe where you don't want it as squashed, or a little bit more. You could go in here and even stretch this out. Oops. Stretch this side out. Something like that. Add a little bit more exaggeration. Right. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and then unpause the video, and we will start going over rendering. Okay, so now that you have your animation all set, next thing that we need to do is we need to drop in our light. So go up onto Arnold and drop in, well, we could just do a physical sky for now. And then we need to change the render settings. So we are going to go into Windows, Render Editors, and Render Settings. Alright, now this part is very important, because if you go to render, you will just get the one frame like we normally do. All we would be seeing is this. That's not what we want to do. So we are going to change these, and we're going to go to File Output. We're going to just do a JPEG, and this is important, this frame animation extension. You notice that these say single frame, so we're going to change this to one of these with a number. You're going to want to do name dot number extension. I like to do this one just because it gets less confused when we bring it over to the other programs. You can adjust your frame padding if you want. This part, the frame range, is also very important. Say so my animation only goes to frame 50, but if I had 200 here, I wouldn't want to render all of those frames. There's a lot of frames that aren't doing anything. So I'm just going to render what I need. So I'm starting at 1 and I'm rendering at 50. So I'm stopping. There's no more animation after that point. You can skip the existing frames that you've already rendered. So if you need to also go back and render just a section, say, the peak of one of your, the peak of the ball at one point wasn't exactly what you needed, or you forgot to tilt something, or something along those lines, you could come back here and just find maybe those 5-6 frames that you need to re-render, or the 10 frames, and that's going to be really important for when you have very long animations, because as you saw in class, this takes a while. So, wouldn't do that. We're going to set up a camera, and we're going to come back and switch this, but if you have already set it up a camera, go ahead and switch to your camera. So another part that is important, because we don't want our animations to be super small or really pixelated and blurry, we're going to maintain height and width ratio, and we're going to go ahead and bump this up to 3000. This is just going to get clearer pictures, this is still super big, but this is only at 72 pixels per inch, so we could go into Photoshop and bump everything up to a resolution of 300, as we saw in the modeling class, that the resolution still doesn't actually put out at that much, right? Next, we're going to come over to the Arnold renderer, and we are going to pump this up to 5. Between 5 and 8, I just don't want you to crash your computer. Another thing that you do want, go ahead and do your play blast before doing this, because as I said, this takes a while, and you don't want anything to be horribly wrong with your animation after you've waited a couple hours for it to render out. So do your play blast first. If you want, you can render at that smaller setting. I could even go down to 100, and it's going to render a lot faster. And then switch that back to 72. So lots of options to do before. This is your final render that you're going to want to do. AOs, if you wanted to turn off the denoiser, your computer might not be as high powered to do this. Just make sure that you are saving, and save a separate file before doing this, just in case something gets corrupted. And all of that. As I said before, when we're rendering, you can do abort on error if you are getting an error while rendering. Normally it's material or a light that Maya doesn't like. Make sure that you save it as a separate file, because there is a big chance of it getting corrupted at when we disable the abort on render. Okay. So, next we need to create our camera, and what's great about cameras is that we can have multiple scenes in one file. What we did for the button on the desk was we did separate files each, because we didn't have a lot of time to render, and we could set up the entire lab to render our animations at one time. So that's an option for you. But if you just want to work in the same file, then you can go ahead and set up multiple cameras and say from frame 1 to 50, I want to render from camera 1, from 50 to 100, I want to render from camera 2, so on and so forth. So we're going to go up to Create, and we're going to go to Cameras, and we can just set up a camera here. Go ahead and click Apply, and Close. So you've probably seen one of the cameras drop down in your scene. We're just going to back this up. You can move this as you wish, and what we can do is we can go see what this camera is seeing. So we're going to go up into Panels, Perspective, and this is camera 1. And so now when I play my animation, obviously that is not what I want my camera to see, so I'm just going to back up a little bit. and now I could change this. Maybe I want camera 1 to be viewing right where that ball bounces, right? And then I would change it somewhere else for camera 2, whatever. So get your camera into the position that you want to be able to see everything. Missing a frame there. But get your camera into the position that want to see everything, and then go back to Windows and the render editor. You can set up the camera first, it's okay. And render settings, and now in that renderable camera, we're going to switch it to camera 1. And close. Now, so if we go to Arnold and render, we can still only render this one panel of viewing, right? So we're going to go over to the render tab and go ahead and save your file. And we are going to go to render and render sequence, and go ahead and pull out that dialog box. And you're going to want to make sure that it has camera 1 here as well. Go ahead and choose your file location. It should be going into your, it will probably go into your default project, so go ahead and find your own file location that you normally use where your project window is. And then you can go ahead and hit render sequence, and it will probably take a few hours. As you saw in class, this is why our projects are due a week later, so that you have, even though we're starting the next project, you have time to render, so you could set up on another computer it rendering while you work on your other project, right? So while you're taking all that couple hours to animate your scene, you have your last scene rendering. But I hope that helped. Remember, you can come back to look at it if you forget some of those, or if your scene isn't rendering clearly. I know it can be really frustrating. So, thanks guys. Let me know if you have any questions.